Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I see many people are joining us today. We're glad you could join us. Welcome to another webinar hosted by Thinc, the Hague Initiative for International Cooperation. This will be our last webinar of this year. So on today's session, we're going to talk about the future of the two-state solution. We'll be covering several topics through the lens of international law. For example, what is the future of Gaza if and when Hamas is eliminated? Can Hamas be eliminated? What about Hamas in the West Bank? Is Israel entitled to reoccupy Gaza? What would that involve? Is this two-state solution required by international law? And is a Palestinian state feasible? For the new joiners, welcome. Thinc is the Hague Initiative for International Cooperation. It is a global network of international law academics, practitioners, and experts in related disciplines. It was founded in 2017 in The Hague, the global capital of international law. We challenge the misuse of international law to delegitimize the state of Israel and advocate international law for peace and security between Israel and her neighbors. International law is a major weapon used by Israel's adversaries, and a misuse of it is an existential threat to the Jewish state. We achieve our mission through research, education, and advocacy. Thank you for joining us today. In our panel, we have two honored guests, Professor Kobi and Professor Wolfgang Bock. Professor Kobi is a senior researcher at INSS. It's the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel, editor-in-chief of Strategic Assessment, and a visiting professor at the International Centre for Policy and Security University of South Wales, UK. Professor Michael served as the Deputy Director General and head of the Palestinian desk at the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Professor Wolfgang Bock is a professor of law and former judge at the Frankfurt Main Regional Court in civil and criminal matters, as well as at the Wiesbaden Administrative Court. For several years, he acted as counselor for constitutional international law at the Federal Academy for Security Policy, covering Near and Middle East and Islam. He writes and teaches on constitutional law and security law, on Islam, Islamic cultures and Islamism, and on policies and legal cultures in the MENA region. Professor Bock is also a senior Thinc Fellow and co-author of the book Two States for Two Peoples, The Palestinian-Israeli Conflict, International Law, and European Union Policy. Last, but certainly not least, as moderator, Advocate Andrew Tucker, Director General of Thinc. Welcome, everybody. Hello, Andrew. Let's begin.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And thank you so much, Professor Kobi and Professor Wolfgang Bock for joining us. We are going to have a very interesting session thinking about the future of the Israel-Palestinian conflict in the context of this conflict in Gaza. President Biden has said that the only way forward is a two-state solution. The United States administration is pressuring Israel not to reoccupy Gaza, not to take control of Gaza, and is advocating that the Palestinian Authority should become the governing power in the Gaza Strip, and that Israel should be working towards a two-state solution. We want to examine this today from an international law perspective. And I'd just like to start the conversation by asking both of you guests, how do you respond to this idea that the only way forward, the best way forward, is a two-state solution in which the Palestinian Authority will be the government? Professor Kobi, what's your perspective on this?
Hello, and thank you for having me here. It might be the best solution, but it is the most irrelevant solution under the current circumstances. We are talking about a very complex situation where the Palestinian entity is actually divided to two independent entities since 2007. And not only two independent entities, but two rival or adversaries. with a zero-sum game between of them, because we have to understand that the Palestinian arena cannot be disconnected from the broader context of the Middle East, mainly after the eruption of the so-called Arab Spring, okay? And the Palestinian Authority, basically, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas belong to two different camps, two different axes, that actually fights between of them for hegemony and influence, and we can find them in any conflict theater in the broader Middle East, where the Palestinian Authority belongs to, I would say, to the pragmatic Arab Sunni countries led mainly by Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Hamas belongs to the resistance axis, actually to two axes, because it is part of the political Islam. This is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, but in the very same time, very deep cooperation with the Shiite axis, which is led by Iran. Therefore, there is a zero-sum game between Fatah and Hamas, between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. The situation becomes even much more complicated due to the war in the Gaza Strip since October 7th. The fact that the Palestinian Authority, which is a failed entity and dysfunctional entity, very corrupted entity, and an entity that supports terrorism in this way or another by paying money to the terrorists and their families, I mean terrorists which are prisoned in Israel, and to their families, by glorifying the martyrs, by active participation of Palestinian personnel, even in very high ranks from the Palestinian security apparatuses in the terror campaign in the West Bank. Okay, we are talking about more than 30 officers from the security establishment of the Palestinian Authority that were killed by the IDF because they actually participated in terror attacks in the West Bank. And this is a Palestinian Authority that its president has not found the time and the opportunity yet to condemn the atrocities of October 7th. And according to the last poll that was conducted by Birzeit University 2 weeks ago, 75% of the entire Palestinian population support the atrocities of October 7th. And we just have to listen carefully to the things that have been said by PA officials, senior officials, with regard to the atrocities of October 7th, in order to understand that all the talks about two-state solution actually are disconnected from the reality. Therefore, I think that this should be our point of departure. And from here, we have to think about the other options that might pave the way, maybe in the future, to the idea of two-state solution.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll come back to many of those topics. Professor Bock, international lawyer, you're co-author of the book on the two-state solution. Is the two-state solution legally viable, or is it legally required even?
Yes, well, I would always differentiate between the political and the legal level. And on the political level, I am really in a far-going community with Kobi. But I wouldn't say on the political level that the Palestinian Authority is what I have thought earlier, but now I have doubts. The Palestinian Authority is not politically in the camp of the Abraham Accord states. And that means they are not in favor of those states who are making peace and a better normalization with Israel. They are against them completely. And so, and at the same time, you have to see that Abbas even said that was a good deed of Hamas to do this. he supported this as well. And there were some people from the Fatah, as far as I know, who took part in it from going out from Gaza as well. So I think on the political level, it would be, just as Kobi said, the worst idea to reproduce the same game we have had with Hamas, but only with the PA now in the Gaza Strip. If they would be there, that would lead to similar situations. I can imagine. It's not sure, but I see they are not far from another, and the program is in the end affects the same annihilation of Israel. That's what the PLO and the PA are till today aiming at. To the legal level, the Palestinians don't have a right to have an own state. They have the right of self-determination. That means they may be empowered to govern themselves to a certain extent, but they don't have a right to have a state of their own from public international law. The other, you have to differentiate if you go to the level of politics. Of course, there may be the possibility in a very far future, I don't think in the next generation, that Israel and the Palestinians come together and they say, we want Israel to exist as a state as it is, and we want an own state on some of the territory of the West Bank and Gaza. Of course, Israel could say, we agree to that, but at the moment, they won't, they can't. And I always have the comparison, nobody will invite somebody to be his neighbor if this person declares the next possibility I get, I rob you and take away from you everything I can get. And so Israel won't allow the Palestinian state within the next time, at least 10 years, I think, to exist, because there is no power within the Palestinians building up a state, a peaceful culture, and culture coming to an understanding, a peaceful understanding with the existence of the state of Israel.
Okay, so back to you, Professor Kobi. Can you just unpack for us a little bit to understand the difference between the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was set up in 1964. You have the Palestinian Authority, which was set up under the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. You have Fatah, which is a movement. You have Hamas. You have Palestinian Islamic Jihad. How do all these entities fit together? Because I think there's a perception out there that Palestine is more or less a state. It's been recognized by the United Nations as an observer, non-member state in the UN General Assembly. A lot of people talk about Palestine as if it were a state. And now, I want to come back to you, Professor Bock, in a moment to explore this concept of statehood from a legal perspective. But just the facts on the ground, Professor Kobi, what is the PA? How does it made up? Who's organized it? Who is in control of the PA?
The first distinction that should be made is between the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. As you have mentioned, the PLO is the sole representative of the entire Palestinian people in the Palestinian territories and in the diaspora. And actually, the Oslo Agreement was signed between the government of Israel and the PLO as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority is an outcome of the Oslo Agreement, and actually the Palestinian Authority is the Palestinian government in the Palestinian territories. And the Palestinian Authority had the responsibility to, first of all, to control the daily life of the Palestinians and the territories under its control according to the Oslo Agreement. And secondly, actually to prepare or to pave the way for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, okay? Although it was not mentioned in such phrasing or words in the Oslo Accords themselves, this was the intention, okay? This was the idea. Now, Fatah is the biggest Palestinian movement along some other Palestinian factions. And actually, it is the biggest Palestinian movement in the PLO as well. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are not members of the PLO, okay? They have any representation in the PLO. By the way, this is one, I would say, of the disputes between Hamas and Fatah, between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, because Hamas demands a representation of 40 to 50% in the PLO. And Abu Mazen is not willing to give them even 10% of representation because he knows that once they will be there in the PLO, then they will be able to gain full control over the PLO due to their popularity and due to the problems with regard to Fatah as, I would say, the biggest component of the PLO. And therefore, when we are talking about the Palestinian Authority of these days, we are talking about Fatah. Hamas is not represented in the Palestinian Authority. Actually, since 2007, the last elections that were held in the Palestinian territories were in January 2006. Hamas won the elections, the parliamentarian elections, and a unified or a unity government was established, and Ismail Haniyeh was nominated as the prime minister. But immediately arguments and disputes between Fatah and Hamas with regard to the authorities of this government that was located in Gaza, okay, because Ismail Haniyeh was in Gaza and he was not allowed by the Israeli authorities to go out from the Gaza Strip. They began to dispute about authorities in the Gaza Strip, and it ended in a coup d'etat in June 2007 when people of the Palestinian Authority, mainly from the preventive security apparatus that was headed by Mohammed Dahlan, were thrown from the roofs of buildings in the Gaza Strip. 170 people actually were killed, were murdered by Hamas. The PA was thrown out from the Gaza Strip, and since June 2007, Hamas has full control over the Gaza Strip, over the territory and the population. And eventually, this is the most essential or substantial, significant asset, strategic asset that Hamas had, and therefore they were not willing to give up on anything with regard to the Gaza Strip, because they knew that this is the most important asset that they are holding in their hands, and their end game is eventually to build their capacities in the West Bank and to gain full control over the entire Palestinian system, which is the PLO and the PA together. And this is the essence, or I would say the core of the dispute between Hamas and Fatah. They are struggling for hegemony, influence, and controlling over the Palestinian system. And this is the reason for a zero-sum game. All the efforts for reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah, and we are talking about more than 12 trials of reconciliation between both, all of them failed, okay, because the gaps between the two are not bridgeable at all. The most, I would say, crucial threat that the Palestinian Authority faces in the West Bank is Hamas. And the Palestinian Authority would not have survived without the presence of the IDF and without the continuing, I would say, pressure that the IDF puts on Hamas and actually saves the Palestinian Authority and assures its survival and stability. The Palestinian Authority by itself is incapable to tackle these threats or these challenges, and is even not willing to do that. This is the reason that we see such a broad scale of intervention of the IDF in the Palestinian cities in the West Bank, which are under direct and full control of the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority is not there. The security apparatuses of the Palestinian Authority are not there in the cities and in the refugee camps in the cities in the West Bank. And the IDF and the General Security Service of Israel, they are doing the work for the sake of the Palestinian Authority as well.
Unmute myself. That's a highly complex situation. Professor Bock, a lot of people think that Palestine is a state already. I mean, okay, there's a difference between Hamas and Fatah and the PLO, but they have a territory, they have more or less a government. In Gaza, it's Hamas. In the West Bank, it's presumably the Palestinian Authority, at least on paper. Why is Palestine not a state in your view? And why does its statehood depend on Israel's agreement?
Yeah, the first point is in international public law, you need, as it is accepted from all sides, three elements. You need the territory, you need the population, and you need the organization which is able to produce statehood-like effects. That means which are an organization able to represent the people against other states, to work together with other states in the way the Charter of the UN wants it. That means you have to accept, to be able to accept other states. And of course, the Charter of the UN says even you have to accept the other states. Neither is the territory clear, because in the Oslo Accords you had the element that and the effect that only the areas A and B are being self-governed by the Palestinians, A completely and B to a smaller extent. Area C, which forms a large part of the West Bank, is, according to the Oslo Accords, being administrated by Israel. So there is no agreement what the territory should be. Israel has altogether the right to do what it wants on the territory of the mandate, because Israel was the only state being founded in 1948 on the mandate territory, and there are legal structures in public international law saying if you found a state within the borders of an earlier administrative entity, you get these borders for the new state as well. And there was no other state founded at the time, 1948, so that Israel has a good right to say we are the sovereign even in the mandate, in the complete territory of the mandate. The Oslo Accords brought a change to this, but not a complete change. The Area C is still open. Therefore, the State of Israel says these are disputed territories in the West Bank. So if the Palestinians want a state, they have to come to an agreement with the State of Israel. Otherwise, there is no clear demarcation which territories belong to Israel, which territories belong to the Palestinians. by the way, most of the states of the Western world don't recognize the existence of a Palestinian state. They say there is no state at the moment. And that is, according to public international law, the correct answer. And if states want to accept a Palestinian state, this brings huge difficulties to public international law. And on the political level, of course, who wants to recognize a terrorist entity, which at the moment is the PA as well, as they are producing terrorism, even with legal methods. I mean, the payment for the terrorists are organized according to their own law. You can read this in law, how much somebody gets who murders an Israeli and who is imprisoned in Israel. So on both levels, on the political level and on the legal level, there is at the moment no possibility of a Palestinian state. And if
the counter argument people will make is that it's the Israeli occupation is preventing the creation of the state. This is an argument I hear a lot. Okay, so it's because Israel is not willing to, Netanyahu is opposed to a two-state solution. Israel is impeding the creation of this state. How do we respond to that?
You can hear this public myth very often, but it is completely wrong. Israel always, and even before 1948, other powers proposed to the Palestinians to form a state of their own alongside an Israeli state, a Jewish state of Israel. And they always rejected all these proposals. That means till today, even if you, I think the last proposals were about 98% of the West Bank and Gaza, and even East Jerusalem, they rejected these proposals. They didn't want it because more important than having a state of their own is for the Palestinians to destroy the state of Israel. That is the aim of the PLO. Look at their charter. That is, of course, that's the aim of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other radical terrorist groups. And so to say Israel prevents a Palestinian state is turning the world upside down. It's just the opposite. The Palestinians never wanted a state as long as a state of Israel exists. The only way they want a state would be to have a better possibility to fight Israel from this state. And of course, as long as they don't accept the existence of Israel, Israel will never be in the situation to say we want the state. Who wants a neighbor state only organized to kill your own state?
Professor Michael, I think in 1988, the PLO accepted on paper Israel's existence. It committed itself to a two-state solution. Many people argue the PLO has agreed to a two-state solution. Is that true in fact, or do you think that the PLO and the PA and all these organizations remain committed to Israel's destruction?
I think that the Palestinian leaders have successfully succeeded in manipulating the consciousness of the international community, or at least many in the international community, as well as, unfortunately, people in Israel, okay? The Palestinians have never recognized in the right of the state of Israel to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people in any borders. In any borders, okay? They have never accepted it. On the contrary, the current Palestinian leader, okay, says publicly that there is no Jewish people. That Jewishness is only a religion. And if Jewishness is only a religion, there is no Jewish people. If there is no Jewish people, there is no right for self-determination. If there is no right for self-determination, there is no right for a nation state, okay? Now, they manipulate, as I said, the consciousness of the international community by using the slogan or the phrase of two-state solution. But when they are asked, or when they were asked by Israel to add only one word, okay, instead of two-state solution, two-nation-state solution, they refuse, okay? And when they are asked, what do you mean by two-state solution? They say the following: the state of Palestine will be the nation state of the Palestinian people, where the state of Israel will be the state of all of its citizens, because we have the Palestinians from 1948, okay? So how it comes that the state of Israel can be the nation state of the Jewish people? What about the 2 million Arab citizens of Israel, which are Palestinians? And therefore, in their perception, the state of Israel should not have any ethnic characteristic or religious characteristics or national characteristic, okay?
But,
And the
but
general
didn't,
idea.
but didn't they agree in the Oslo Accords to accept Israel's existence as a Jewish state?
No. They say the state of Israel, okay? But they didn't recognize the state of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. This is the essence of the conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a territorial conflict. And you know what is the ultimate indication or the ultimate proof to my statement? Is Annapolis process. In 2008, okay, the end of 2008, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, offered to Abu Mazen. Even the Americans were astonished, surprised, okay, from the generosity of this offer. He offered the Palestinian 100% of the territory, 96% of the original West Bank territory, and an additional 4% in swap, okay? Because we have agreed about the annexation of the settlements blocks, where 80% of the entire settlements are concentrated, located there in this block, okay? And we say this is something like 4% of the entire percentage of the West Bank. We will annex it to the state of Israel. We will dismantle all the settlements which are outside or eastern the security barrier, and we will compensate you with 4% from the territories of Israel of 1967, okay? And Israel was willing, the same Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, in addition to 100% of the territory. By the way, he agreed also to a physical geographical connection between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank that will go through the sovereign territory of the state of Israel, and this corridor will be under the Palestinian sovereignty, okay? Even on that, Prime Minister Olmert agreed. And he agreed to divide the responsibility with regard to the Holy Basin of Jerusalem, which includes Haram Sharif, the Temple Mount, okay, to divide the responsibility, the sovereignty between Israel, the Palestinians, and the sort of a council of some Arab Muslim countries. And he was willing even to absorb on a symbolic basis, not acknowledging in the right of return of the refugees that actually does not exist from the international law point of view, okay? This is something that exists only in the ethos of the Palestinians and their interpretation to the international law, which is a wrong interpretation. Prime Minister Olmert was willing to absorb on a symbolic basis 10,000 Palestinians, refugees, each year for 10 years, okay? And eventually they said no. They said no. Now, in 2014, Secretary of State Kerry, okay, under the Obama administration, came with very similar ideas or principles where Israel accepted it, and President Obama till today, okay, expects Abu Mazen to give him the answer, what is the position of the Palestinians with regard to Kerry parameters. So we have to understand that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a territorial conflict. Israel, by the way, showed twice in the past that it is ready to evacuate settlements, settlers, people, and territories for the sake of peace. We did it in the peace treaty with Egypt with regard to Sinai Peninsula, and we did it in 2005 with regard to the entire Gaza Strip, okay? And additional 4 settlements in the northern part of Samaria in the West Bank, okay? And what eventually did we get in the Gaza Strip? Hamastan, okay? There is no a single settler, a single settlement, or a single soldier in the territories of the Gaza Strip. We withdraw to the international borders, okay, of 1948. And what happened there in the Gaza Strip? Instead of developing the Gaza Strip and instead of making the Gaza Strip Singapore of the Middle East, okay, they made it Hamastan. Instead of developing the infrastructure and instead of developing their economy and instead of building their future there, they built under Gaza, okay, all the more than 500 kilometers of terror tunnels and terror infrastructures, and they stole all the aid and all the materials that went into the Gaza Strip and all the money that came for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. They stole it from their people in order to invest it in the production of weapon and terrorism. So territory is not the issue. At the end of the day, the essence of the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians is the unwillingness of the Palestinians to accept the right of the state of Israel to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people in any borders. And last sentence in this regard, okay? If we want to understand what are the real intentions of the Palestinians, we have to do 3 things. First of all, to listen carefully and in Arabic to the things that are said by their leaders, from Abu Mazen to the last senior official of the Palestinian Authority, okay? Not in English, but in Arabic. What do they say to their people, to the Palestinians? This is the first thing. The second thing, we have to look for the curriculum. What is eventually is learned? What is indoctrinized? How they use this social agent, the educational system, in order to educate their people, and what actually they are educating, okay? What is the essence of the education? And we see there all the incitement and the hatred towards the Jews and towards the state of Israel, the delegitimization of the state of Israel, introducing the state of Israel as a colonial project and so on and so forth. And of course, glorifying the idea of murdering and slaughtering the Jews, okay? All of these appear in the official Palestinian curriculum. And the third thing, okay, we have to look for the PLO charter. You know that the Palestinians were committed to change their original charter. There are something like 19 articles in the original chapter that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. Okay, and all the idea of the phases plan of the PLO. Till today, they haven't changed the charter. The same charter of the PLO, the original charter, still exists. Not talking about the charter of Hamas, okay, from 1988. So we just have to look and to listen carefully and to read their official documents in order to understand what are the real intention at the end of the day of this Palestinian entity or these Palestinian entities.
Thank you. Professor Bock, I want to come back to you. The Palestinian people, as a people, have a right to self-determination, you said. Why is that not a right to a state? Because it could be argued that Israel has agreed in principle that the Palestinians should have a state. They're getting very close to having a government. Why does it not include a right to statehood under international law?
Well, here the structures of public international law are clear and agreed upon by the overwhelming majority of states. If you give the right to every part of a population to declare themselves a nation or an independent people, you will have at once in the whole world about 10, 20, 30 wars of people wishing to divide themselves from the state where they are members. And that's a result public international law always wanted to prevent. So the right of self-determination gives you the possibility to argue within a state for a separation. You can make this peacefully. Take the example of Czechoslovakia, where the Slovaks and the Czechs divided peacefully in the 90s. This is a possibility public international law always agrees to and gives you. But to prevent this danger of many, many wars in many states, and especially as not only within a state, but as soon as some people say we want to be known as we want to have a state of our own, the neighbor state will say, of course, we help you. And so you will have many wars between states because the people who want to divide themselves and to separate themselves will get proxies and helpers within other states who say we want to diminish the state as he is. He could be a future danger to us. So that's what public international law wants to prevent in all cases. Therefore, there is no right to a state for a part of the population of a state who says we have an own culture. They have a right of self-determination. That means they can have a certain autonomy culturally, economically, even politically, and sometimes even legally. But that's all. There's no right of a state for people wishing to disintegrate from a state. And I think I wanted to come to one point you have asked at the beginning, and now we are near the end. So the question, what happens in Gaza next? From the political and legal point of view, well, you have the situation that there is a very radicalized population who is till today mostly on the side of Hamas, and of course they are on the side to destroy Israel. That all the results of all polls give you this as the factual situation. And so there's a difficult question what to do with a population who is very radicalized, and who, if you let them on their own, if you leave them on your own, there is the big possibility that they build up something similar to Hamas. And so it's a question not only for Israel, but for other Arab countries as well, if they can succeed to work together, not to let something like this happen again in the Gaza Strip. And I would say every possibility you give the PA to reign into the Gaza Strip will bring in the long run a similar situation, terrorism coming out of Gaza against Israel. So my point of view, my perspective, it's only a political perspective, not a legal one. It says the public international law doesn't give solutions to all problems, but there's a big room for political structures. My proposal would be: don't let the PA set one foot in Gaza again. Build up a structure, and if it takes you 5 to 10 years build up another structure and help the people in this way. And that means you have to work together with those states who are in favor of peace with Israel. These are the neighbors, and these are sometimes even the friends. Some families from the Palestinians stem from these states. So you have to work together with the peace-loving people in the Arab, within the Arab states and within the Arab governments, and to build up structures which prevent something like PA, Hamas, or something similar, breeding new terrorism against Israel.
So, Professor Kobi, what is Israel's perspective on this? What are their goals? What does the government have a strategy for rebuilding Gaza after the end of this conflict?
Just before answering directly your question, let me provide our viewers with a very short and general background with regard to the essence of the war in Gaza. Okay, people tend to think that this is the private war of Israel against Hamas, which is very limited to a very small and tiny place, which is the Gaza Strip. No, this is not the situation. We are in a regional war. Okay. And this is a regional war that impacts directly global affairs, because everything that happens here impacts Ukraine or the Southern Chinese Sea or any other conflict theater in the entire globe. We have to understand that Hamas is a component, together with Hezbollah and with other proxies, is a component of a very broad and strong camp or axis, which is led by Iran, okay, the resistance axis, which is led by Iran and supported by Russia and China. Israel, in this regard, is already engaged in a multi-front war. Israel is engaged vis-a-vis 5 active fronts in different levels of intensity, okay? The Gaza Strip, the West Bank, South Lebanon, South Syria, and Yemen. And there are 2 additional fronts that might erupted, Western Iraq and the domestic arena, the Arab citizens of Israel. And this is not an imaginary scenario. We met it 2.5 years ago, okay, in May 21, in our streets in the big cities. So in this regard, Hamas is not an existential threat for Israel, neither Hezbollah, but the entire complex, okay, or the entire regional warfare, or the entire axis which is led by Iran, supported by Russia and China, this is an existential threat for the state of Israel. And therefore, okay, we have to do what we have to do in order to accomplish successfully the mission in the Gaza Strip, which means to dismantle the governmental and the military capacities of Hamas in a way that Hamas will not be able to become once again a military and governmental entity in the Gaza Strip or in any other Palestinian territory. And if Israel will not be able to accomplish successfully this mission, Israel is going to face huge problems and challenges and threats in all the other fronts. But this will not be only the problem of Israel. This is going to be the problems of the Dutch people, as well as of the German people and the American people, because you have to listen carefully to the things that are said, not by Professor Kobi Michael, but by the leaders of Hamas themselves, okay? And they say the following, by the way, repeatedly even today. The first phase is the destruction of the state of Israel. The second phase will be Rome, Berlin, and New York. We intend to re-establish the Islamic Caliphate, okay? And the entire world will be Islamic Caliphate. In this Islamic Caliphate, all the infidels, which are the Christians and the Jews, will have one opportunity and one only, to convert to Islam or to be slaughtered. Once again, these are not my words. These are the words of Hamas leaders. And I warmly recommend everybody in the streets that go to demonstrate and to yell from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, okay, to think and to listen carefully to the things that are said, because Europe and the entire civilized world are the second phase of Hamas and the political Islam and the Jihadiyya Salafiyya. Okay, and in this regard, Israel is the last barrier, not less than that. Israel is the last barrier, the last fourth in front of this barbaric incursion to the civilized world. And this is the reason that all the civilized world should support Israel and pray for the success of Israel. Otherwise, you are going to meet this threat in your streets, believe me. Now, with regard to your question, the objectives of the war are very clear, and there are three objectives. The first one was already mentioned, the dismantling of the military and governmental capacities of Hamas. The second one is, of course, the release of the hostages, okay? We are making all the possible efforts, the utmost efforts in order to release them. We understand after Hamas breached the agreement, the last agreement, okay? We understand that the only way to bring Hamas once again to the negotiation table is by increasing the military pressure in a way that they will understand that continue holding the hostages is not a strategic asset anymore, but a strategic liability, okay? And the third objective of the war is to assure that the Gaza Strip will ever never be once again what it used to be until October 7th. And here we have to work together with our allies here in the region, and of course with the United States of America, and with the leading countries in Europe, meaning the UK, Germany, France, in order to establish in the Gaza Strip a sort of a trusteeship that will be composed, okay, of the Arab countries here in the region, the United States of America, and these European countries that I have mentioned. This trusteeship will have a mandate for 5 or 10 years to run the territory and the population, to begin with the daily life and with the immediate needs, and then to continue with the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. And in the very same time, and in parallel to that, to train and to educate and to support the local technical administration that will be built in the Gaza Strip based on Gazans, not the Palestinian Authority, okay? Because the Palestinian Authority is incompetent in this regard, is not able to run effectively the West Bank, which is much less complicated than the Gaza Strip, so it will be able to come and to run the Gaza Strip. And this Palestinian Authority that supports the atrocities of October 7th, this will be the outcome of the war. And in parallel to the process in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank should be deconstructed and reconstructed. Because, as I said before, the current Palestinian Authority is the most unsuitable entity to be partner for the state of Israel, to be partner for a peace process, or to be an effective entity that can rule effectively the territory and the residents there, the Palestinians. And if everything will be run under the umbrella of the new regional architecture, that actually we were in the middle of the process of the creation of such an architecture based on the normalization process between the State of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the other Arab countries, only under such an umbrella and along a process that will last 5 to 10 years, maybe we will be able to establish a sort of a Palestinian federation composed of two states, the state of Gaza and the state of the West Bank, that later on might be a part of a new confederation, which is the Jordanian Palestinian Confederation. It cannot be done by the Israelis. The bilateral level between Israel and the Palestinians has already been exhausted. Okay, nothing positive will come out from the bilateral level. We have to talk about a multilateral level, a regional level that will provide the Israelis and the Palestinians with a broader space of opportunities, because we are talking about additional players, additional agendas, additional interests, and mainly additional resources. And I hope that the Palestinian society, which is, by the way, a very ill, sick society, because if we are talking about 75% of this society that supports the atrocities of October 7th, we are talking about a very ill society. I hope that this society will be able to grow a new leadership, a much more responsible and accountable leadership, that at the end of the day will be able to do something like the proposal that I have described.
We have a few minutes left for a couple of questions, and I'd like to ask about this multilateral aspect. What are the possibilities, and which are the main states in the region that need to play a role? And I'm thinking particularly of Egypt, which so far has refused to open the Rafah border to allow Palestinians in. Is Egypt key, central to this? And how realistic is it to form this coalition that's going to rebuild Gaza?
Actually, this coalition was already formed. I mean, this is the vision of the American administration. This is the vision of President Biden, and this is the Israeli vision. I'm taking you back to Abraham Accords, okay? This is the idea of the new regional architecture, and Saudi Arabia is the most significant Arab Muslim country in this regard. But I will tell you definitely should not be, or who must not be, okay, under this umbrella. Qatar and Turkey, okay, both of them are the biggest providers and supporters of Hamas. Qatar is a very problematic country, and I would say that in a sense, I think that the Israelis were wrong and the American administration was wrong when they actually transformed Qatar to the princess of diplomacy here in the region, okay, where Qatar is the biggest supporter of Hamas. The main interest of Qatar is to assure that Hamas will remain as an effective military and political entity in the Gaza Strip. Qatar also supports many other jihadi terror organizations. This is, I would say, the Qatarian strategy, okay? The idea of issuing insurance policies for Qatar by providing money to terror organizations in order to prevent them from attacking Qatar. Okay, Qatar is telling them, you can slaughter whoever you want, but not the Qatarians. Take the money, okay, and leave us alone. And they have the money, and they have their Al Jazeera, which is the most dangerous and inciting media platform in the world. Very dangerous platform that ignites all the Arab streets in the entire region, okay? And with these two soft elements of power, money and Al Jazeera, they actually are able to buy and to bribe many elements in the Western societies, be it universities, football clubs, museums, okay, media platforms, and so on and so forth. And I think that the United States of America should have brought Qatar on its knees in the first day of the war, telling Qatar, you have 24 hours to evacuate all Hamas activists from the Qatarian soil, to stop immediately any kind of support in Hamas, and to shut down Al Jazeera. If you are not going to do that, you are going to be left alone, okay? Qatar is a very teeny, funny country with less than 400 citizens and 1.5 million modern slaves. It cannot survive 2 hours without the envelope, without the support of the Americans. The biggest American base in the entire Middle East is there in Qatar, okay? But instead of doing that, and instead of enforcing Qatar to enforce Hamas to release unconditionally all the hostages, the United States of America and Israel, unfortunately, came to the Qatarians and asked the Qatarians to mediate and to negotiate. And Qatar became to be the princess of diplomacy here in the region. This is a moral mistake, and this is a strategic mistake. And when we don't have a moral clarity, we don't have a strategic clarity. And I think that this is a huge problem that must be fixed.
Okay, so we're going to go to the questions. Thank you very much. One question that's come in from Elizabeth is, what should be done with Qatar, where the biggest US base is positioned, and Turkey, which is part of NATO? So how if you say these are the two most dangerous countries, they're part of the system, how can we deal with them? A brief
First
answer.
of all, Qatar and Turkey are not in the same level, okay? Turkey is a much more complicated issue because it is a member of NATO and it is a very crucial asset of the United States in Eurasia and in the Middle East. But Turkey can be pressured by the Americans and by NATO, by the way, and by the EU. And it can be sanctioned by all of these three that I have just mentioned. And I think that with the right policy and with the right determination, Turkey can be influenced in a way that it will be less negative. Okay, Turkey is very problematic. Turkey is very, very problematic. Okay, and the idea that the Turkish president is preaching Israel about the aggressiveness of Israel, okay, and about the genocide and the war crime that Israel is committing when he kills and murders thousands of Kurdish people in northern Syria, and he invaded to the sovereign territory of Syria, and he sends Turks to be there on the Syrian soil, okay? And he comes and preaches Israel and blames Israel about committing war crimes. But with regard to Qatar and the idea that, as I say, the biggest American base is located there, the Americans have a huge leverage on the Qatarians. A huge leverage. The Qatarians are enjoying a very special status of an ally or a non-member ally of NATO. This is something that can be changed in 2 minutes. Something that can be changed in 2 minutes. I mean, the idea of comparing between the leading superpower of the world, the United States of America, with this teeny country, Qatar. I mean, there is any comparison between of them? The United States of America can smash Qatar in 2 seconds. And the idea that the United States of America comes and asks for the mediation services of Qatar, which is the biggest supporter, not only of Hamas, of terrorism in the entire world. I mean, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, all of these jihadic organizations were supported by Qatar.
Okay.
And until today, supported by Qatar.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Professor Bock. The victims in all of this seem to be the Palestinian people themselves. So we talk a lot about the leadership. Why is it that, what is to be done with the Palestinians themselves who are in a kind of limbo situation? If they can't have statehood, are they to be kept in some kind of occupation as refugees for the next 10 or 20 years until what can be done for the Palestinian people?
Well, I think I have to answer first a little more your last question, for I think Kobi just doesn't go far enough. The United States have since Obama, have the strategy to come to an agreement with Iran, and therefore they don't act against all the proxies of Iran as they should. They're being attacked, but they don't attack back in many cases. And they don't restrict the enemies of the West, of Israel, because who are proxies of Iran, because they think they can come to an agreement with Iran. That's the main problem. And therefore, they won't do anything against Qatar. That's the reason. And Turkey is another point, and I agree completely to what was said about Turkey. And the United States has said till today They want the two-state solution and the PA in Gaza. So that's a real problem. And Israel has to convince the United States that this is neither of these two ways are a solution. And that's a big problem. And there's no question that allies are together. No. In regard to Iran, the United States have taken other steps than Israel wanted all the time since Obama, not under Trump, but under Obama and Biden. And Biden is the continuation of Obama, nothing more, from my point of view. Now I come to the Palestinians. As the first aim for the Palestinians should be to help them to develop what they till today didn't want to do, to develop a culture, being a political, civilized, law-centered, centered on self-determination, on open political discussions among them. As long as we don't have this, you can forget everything else. They are at the moment 75% in favor of the Hamas massacre, of terrorism and destroying Israel. As long as they are in this state, it is evil to help them. One should make dependent every step of help from the European Union and from other people to developments towards another culture. And if they don't want to do it, don't give them money. So it's a very difficult situation. There's no question of a state, not at all. A state wouldn't help them in any regard. It would be a terrorist entity, nothing more. So don't ask for a state, ask for the Palestinian culture. That's the main problem. Two-state solutions doesn't change anything on this level, so let it be and don't argue about it till you have changed the situation. And then maybe in a further future, there is a possibility to come to a solution, but not at the moment.
Okay, so we have to draw things a little bit to a close. A couple of very final questions. What role can Europe play, or should Europe play, and the West generally, in this process of creating this new culture, of building an alliance in the Middle East? Do you have a quick answer to that question?
Yes, the Europeans should be able to understand this problem. That means changing many of the positions they have till today. They're in favor of the two-state solution. They think the Palestinian Authority is able to come to a civilized, democratic or republican or state of law situation. That's completely not true. So they have to change their position completely. That takes them a really big shock. I don't know if the shock of the Hamas massacre was sufficient. I don't think so. There needs to be more discussions. The Europeans won't do this, what I would hope they would do. At the moment, they don't do it. So that's a question of getting more publicity, getting more public discussion on this, and helping to change the European policy. Otherwise, they'll do the same what they did all the time. And they try to do, and you know, politicians never want to be reminded that they did any mistakes. So you have a huge problem with the European Union and their Middle and Near East policy, favoring Iran and the Palestinians all the time, and not wishing to recognize the deep difficulties which are there. The United States are much better in this regard. The Republicans and parts of the Democrats as well in Congress and in Senate see it. And so I have more hopes for on the United States than on the EU. Sorry to say that. But the United States at the moment they didn't say a word on what could happen and what should happen afterwards. And this coalition, and of course the states of the Abraham Accords won't say a word till the situation comes where they can say a word. At the moment, it would be taking, they are against Hamas, that's quite sure, but they don't say it openly to their populations. They don't say we have a lot of terrorists amongst the Palestinians whom we have to fight. They don't say that at the moment. That's their position. But as soon as Hamas has been defeated, I think they'll be open to discuss solutions. And privately or on the unofficial level, I'm sure they say that. But of course, I'm not in the diplomatic service, and so I don't know about that. But I heard already about that all of them say privately, all the states of the Abraham Accord say privately, defeat Hamas first. That's the main thing. And don't listen to the Americans if they want to prevent you to do this. So they are all in favor of defeating Hamas and seeing what happens next. And the Americans have to be forced to listen to these states and to give up their two-state PA favoring positions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. One very last question to you, Professor Kobi. Question from Hans Peter. Is it not naive to expect there will be a peaceful situation with the Palestinians? Is not the mentality of the Palestinians, many of whom, as you say, support Hamas, can this mindset be changed?
Might be changed in a generation or two, not in the very soon future. This is exactly the problem that we are facing. Okay, we are talking about, as I said before, we are talking about a very sick society with a very, I would say, problematic leadership. And this is not a problem of today. This is a problem of 120 years of the Palestinian movement, okay, or the Palestinian national movement. Since the first beginning, all of the leaders of the Palestinians actually repeatedly made all the same mistakes, okay? I would like to remind, I assume that most of our reviewers are not familiar with this historical fact, but Haj Amin al-Husseini, the first national leader of the Palestinians, he supported Hitler in World War II and before World War II. Actually, he recruited himself, okay, to the Nazi regime in order to help the Nazis to eliminate the Jews. And Yasser Arafat, okay, in 1956 in Egypt, he joined the Muslim Brotherhood against the Egyptians. And in the late 60s and September 70, he initiated the Black September in Jordan. Okay, they almost destroyed the Jordanian kingdom that hosted them, and then they moved to Lebanon and they destroyed the state of Lebanon. And in 1991, okay, they supported the invasion of Saddam Hussein to Kuwait, and they were departed from Kuwait. This is a very destructive society. This is a society which the national ethos is based on two major pillars. The first one is the idea of the victimhood narrative, the refugees, the right of return, which is the other side of the coin of the destruction of the state of Israel. And the other pillar is the armed resistance, which means terrorism, okay? So I don't see in the near future any possible for any sort of peace agreement with the Palestinians. And I do agree that first of all, Hamas must be defeated and the victory image must be clear and cut, okay? Very, very convincing image of victory with regard to Hamas. Otherwise, we are going to tackle all the very negative consequences in the other fronts. And let me just conclude, with your permission, with one sentence for the sake of our viewers with regard to the Israeli psyche, as far as I understand. The Israeli psyche, I mean the psyche of the Israeli society. The Israeli society is in the sense of chapter B of our War of Independence, not less than that. You must understand that, okay? We, in the Israeli psyche, we are under severe existential threat, not less than that. And when a people is under a threat of or under existential threat, it is left with two options only: to be or not to be. Now, due to the fact that the second option of not to be is not an option, we do not intend to take our luggage and to come to Amsterdam or to The Hague. We intend to remain here in the nation state of the Jewish people, and we intend that this state will continue prospering and flourishing and be secure state. We are going to do whatever is required and needed to do, be it with the international community or without the international community, with the United States of America or without the United States of America. This is our life, and we intend to remain here. And if we have to do what we have to do, we will do what we have to do.
Thank you both. Thank you so much, both of you. We could continue this conversation. There are other questions that have come in. I hope we've dealt with most of your questions. There are a few that we haven't had time for. Thank you both to our guests for speaking to us today. It's been extremely informative. We will continue the conversation in the coming webinars. I invite you to visit our website, www.Thinc-Israel.org. Join our newsletter. If you have not already signed up, please make a donation to our work to enable our work to continue. And we look forward to connecting with you on social media, in any other platform, as we go forward to continue the dialogue and the conversation about how to develop peace and security in the Middle East, and the role of international law to promote peace and security. Thank you again for your time. Thank you to our guests, and we look forward to seeing you in January at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks.